During this project, we sought to analyze the viability and consequences of Phoenix transitioning their food economy into one that places more emphasis on consuming food that is grown within the city and using space efficiently to meet the needs of its citizens. Our client for this project was the population of Phoenix, Arizona. The citizens of Phoenix are the ones that will ultimately be affected by the implementation of urban farming practices in the city. After determining who our client was for this assignment, we then set out to determine which trends would be the most important when trying to analyze the future of urban farming. During this process, we weighed the potential impact of each of the trends and ranked them according to how much of an effect they would have on the transition towards large-scale urban farming. Of the 8 key drivers, we determined that water consumption and climate change would have the greatest impact on the movement. After determining our key drivers for the analysis, we set out to interview people who would have insight into urban farming in the city of Phoenix as a community. Our interviewees included a farmer, an animal rights activist, the owner of a local vegan restaurant, a zero-waste program assistant, 3 students, and a scientist conducting research on the intersection between behavioral science, ecosystems, and psychology. After interviewing our participants, we determined the most common themes present between their answers. Common themes present in their responses included the impact of farming practices, concern over food availability, faith in grassroots movements, and hope for stronger community. There is a common belief that education is the starting point for progressing towards a more urban-centered agricultural system. Next, we investigated scenarios for urban farming in Phoenix following possible variations in our top 2 trends. With insight from our interviews, we proceeded to develop these scenarios into full-fledged stories that could immerse the reader in the atmosphere of that particular future. 4 stories were written in total, describing alternative futures dependent on the amount of climate change and water consumption in Phoenix in the year 2050. Our first scenario outlines a dystopian future where nothing can live or grow in Phoenix due to the onslaught of massive drought. The lack of water has left Phoenix a barren wasteland, only leaving behind the most resistant of desert-inhabiting plants and animals. The scenario illustrates what Phoenix would be like if the consequences of climate change and water consumption are high in the year 2050. One strength of this scenario is the fact that the water cycle is a natural phenomenon. There is nothing man-powered about the recycling of water through the ecosystem around Phoenix, so this will continue to be an influential power once humans leave. This opens up the possibility of this area becoming habitable at some point in the future. A weakness of this scenario is the idea that once people leave Phoenix, they will inhabit other areas, putting stress on surrounding cities in their search for more water. An opportunity is the chance to learn from our mistakes. A real-life example of a megacity running out of water gives the rest of the world the chance to reflect on their consumption habits. This scenario also presents a very large threat in that it could be too late for other cities to adapt to the environment. In the second scenario, Phoenix has survived in the harsh environment caused by increased global warming as a result of their infrastructure changes and water-saving technological innovations. Climate change is at an all-time high, but water use has decreased and has allowed Phoenix to run a successful urban farming project. The population has increased significantly as neighboring areas have been emptied in favor of Phoenix's superior quality of life in the desert around the city. The abundance of local food vendors has provided jobs for many citizens who were unemployed prior to the advent of urban agriculture in the area. A weakness of this scenario is the amount of people living in Phoenix, as it could eventually lead towards overpopulation. Reaching Phoenix's carrying capacity would be problematic for everyone within the city and cause additional major adjustments to be made. An opportunity in this scenario is the ability to act as a leader for other cities in the Southwest that have to deal with similar problems caused by climate change and subsequent global warming. A major threat to the scenario is the nature of politics outside of the state, which could affect the progress of further urban farming initiatives. In the third scenario, Phoenix has become the city of the ignorant. Water resources have quickly drained as a result of overconsumption, despite climate change advancing at a slower pace than previously anticipated. Mass middle-class immigration has left a divide between those rich enough to afford the expensive water and those who are too poor to leave the region. Governing bodies have implemented bracket pricing, meaning that water costs more per unit the more a person uses it, but consumption remains high due to the dynamics of the population. One strength of this scenario is that meat consumption has dropped. Since beef and pork production can heavily drain water resources, residents have adopted backyard chicken farming as a source of protein, pest control, and food waste disposal. A weakness of the scenario is that crime has increased near the vacant lots of residents who have left the region. A threat to this scenario is a population increase due to the drought's extension towards the south. The drought could extend into Tucson and Mexico, catalyzing a northward migration from these regions into Phoenix, which would further stress water resources. The fourth and final scenario, the revolutionary Phoenix, was designed to illustrate what could come as a result of minimal climate change and water use. In this scenario, desert climates were kept similar to current trends and water use was significantly decreased. The most significant strengths of this scenario are the community support and the confidence in Phoenix residents to innovate and work towards more sustainable practices. A major weakness of this scenario is potential policy changes. Phoenix's greatest opportunity as it becomes a pilot for water conservation efforts is examining successful and unsuccessful techniques from the past. The biggest threat to our scenario is the possibility of water consumption reaching even higher levels, and the much depleted Colorado River could become dry before the valley has a chance to begin water conservation efforts. Through our research, we've gained valuable insight into what the future might have in store for urban farming in Phoenix, Arizona. In order to make it work, there will have to be efforts addressing public policy, infrastructure change, education reform, and many other factors before any significant progress can be made. The scenarios that we've created illustrate just how powerful climate change and water consumption will be in determining what Phoenix will look like in the year 2050. After considering the possible futures for urban farming in Phoenix, we recommend a behavioral shift towards water conservation. Ensuring that there is enough water to go around in the valley is absolutely key to the success of urban farming in Phoenix. Since climate change will also be such a defining characteristic of the near future, it's important that Phoenix plans ahead and adjusts its physical infrastructure to accommodate these changes. The third major step towards urban farming involves getting the public behind the idea. Without proper education and awareness, there will be no force behind the movement to push it along.